MSTR ATM Dilution. Okay, guys, we're going to talk about it in this video since it seems like a lot of you guys are going crazy over the recent dilution and the amendment to Michael Saylor's ATM offering program, aka at the market offering program. So this is the way basically MSTR has been raising a good chunk of its capital lately. They're using the ATM program, right? So the ATM program was initially announced as a way for basically Michael Saylor and Phong Le. So Michael Saylor, executive chairman of strategy, and Phong Le, the CEO. These two guys together have basically been spearheading the entire Bitcoin accumulation strategy. So in the beginning, back when the company first started accumulating Bitcoin, they didn't have a lot of money. I'm talking about like back in August 2020, guys. You guys can check out here on this chart here, back when the stock was around like 10 to 13 bucks. So when they first started out, they were actually borrowing money to buy Bitcoin. So that was like the strategy at first, because in the beginning, MSTR was a really small company. Guys, they weren't big. The stock price was like 13 bucks, split adjusted. They didn't have a bunch of investors. They didn't have a cult following like they do now. All they had was basically the ability to basically borrow money to buy Bitcoin. So as you can see here, they use a couple of different structures, obviously issuing common equity, long-term debt, preferred equity. But in the beginning, it was debt that allowed them to fuel their Bitcoin holdings. So if we take a look at the chart here, we can see that in Q3 2020, they started out with about 38,000 Bitcoin. But obviously, it wouldn't have worked, right, to simply just borrow money, keep borrowing money and borrowing money without a way to pay it off. So that's when Saylor sat down and figured out a way to fund the accredited purchases of Bitcoin and dilute shareholders without decreasing Bitcoin per share. I'm going to say this again. The solution that Saylor figured out, other than borrowing money to accumulate a lot of Bitcoin, was to simply sell shares at the market of the common stock, MSTR, and some of these preferred stocks. This is a way to raise capital, dilute the shareholders in an accredited model. So we're going to dig right into this a little bit deeper and explain to you guys how this ATM strategy works, even though everyone's freaking out about it. So most recently, Michael Saylor, he backtracked on his ATM strategy. So I was mentioned this in a previous video, but basically they posted this little chart in the Q2 presentation. So this was basically their guidance, right? So based on the MNAV, they would determine whether they would dilute shareholders or not. But something changed, guys. Something changed, and that's when they came out and they added a third part to the strategy if the MNAV is below 2.5. So they said when otherwise deemed advantageous to the company. So some of you guys are torn. Some of you guys are upset because MSTR has been going down over the last couple of days while Bitcoin has either been going up or flat. A lot of the Bitcoin treasury companies actually have been selling off most recently as we're heading into the September 2025 Fed interest rate cut decisions. And I think that's because a lot of people don't strategy. It's a little bit complicated. It's quite orthodox. Not a lot of companies are using it. And we're so used to, for example, CEOs selling stock to raise capital. So usually CEOs obviously sell stock to raise capital, but that is a dilutive measure. So if we're going to kind of break things down, I want to kind of compare it to it and show you guys why the MSTR strategy is a little bit different. I'm going to show you guys how this is actually going to benefit all of us in the long run, because it's actually been benefiting us for a while. So it was actually in third quarter 2024 when Saylor announced the 21-21 plan. So basically, just to quickly go over it, the reason why they're diluting so much because they planned this in 2024. So basically, they set a goal to raise $21 billion of equity and $21 billion in fixed income securities. In other words, they plan to sell $21 billion of MSTR stock and $21 billion of some of those preferred shares that I was talking about earlier, right? STRC STRF, STRC, STRK, and STRD. Okay, these are right here. You can see kind of a breakdown of all of the potential, all of the potential ways you can kind of enter the Bitcoin market now through the stock markets. And we can see these these preferred shares are part of the other one, the 21 billion plan. So 21 billion they plan to sell in MSTR stock, and 21 billion and this. So why does this work, guys? So we kind of explained what's going on. We've kind of explained how the ATM works. Saylor and his team basically go to the market and sell the stock at market price, take the proceeds, and recently they've been buying Bitcoin. So this has allowed them to accumulate over 636,000 Bitcoin so far. Okay, why does this work? Why is this not a bad thing? I'm going to explain to you guys why. And we need to understand that the relationship between the US dollar and Bitcoin is completely breaking down. So to help you guys understand why this is a smart idea, and let's take a look at Bitcoin's price chart over the long run. Okay, so this doesn't really go back as far as I would like to really show you guys what I'm talking about. But even so, it has a pretty good example. So about 10 years ago, okay, 10 years ago from now, back in September 2015, Bitcoin was trading for about 250 bucks. Okay, 250 bucks. Fast forward 10 years later, Bitcoin's trading for $111,000. Okay, Bitcoin's gone up like over 500x over the last 10 years, right? So from $200 range to $110,000 range over the last 10 years. To give you guys a more exact calculation, according to Case Bitcoin, Bitcoin is up 46,000% over the last 10 years. So the reason why the ATM strategy is so brilliant is because it quickly and easily achieves three important yet difficult problems to solve when it comes to being an investor. Number one, how are you going to make your stock price go up consistently over the long run without stressing over offering or launching or updating new products and services? Well, that's simply to increase Bitcoin yield and increase the Satoshis per share. So Bitcoin per share is the way this works. So each year following MSTR's Bitcoin strategy, they've been able to increase the amount of sats per share. And as you can see here, they started out with 56,000 sats per share, and now we've hit almost 200,000 sats per share. This works because Bitcoin's price has consistently gone up in the long run. So when they're adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet, what they're doing is they're selling paper assets, fiat assets, right, in terms of MSTR stock and the preferred shares, and then they're buying Bitcoin. They're basically doing what all of us should be doing consistently, every month on a regular basis, but we don't necessarily have the money to, or have the wherewithal, or just have the means. And this strategy has worked like gangbusters. It's given strategy over, the largest Bitcoin treasury reserve stash in the entire world in terms of corporate holdings, other than Satoshi or someone like that who's anonymous. But it also redefines the way that Wall Street needs to think about companies in the future. Because right now, if take a look, we'll show you guys some of the 2025 guidance. Okay, these numbers are insane, and they just show why it's smart now for companies to be selling stock and selling, low yielding, investments and things like that, and buying Bitcoin. So if we look at the 2025 guidance, we can see that MSTR is projected to have $20 billion in Bitcoin gain. Okay. 24 billion in net income, $80 per share, and over $34 billion in operating income. These numbers are not normal for a company to do $24 billion in net income just 5 years into their transformational strategy. And this is only possible because of the ATM program. So for you guys out there that think that the ATM program it is diluting the stock too much, not only has Saylor given us exceptional returns, but the dilution isn't that high. We'll take a look at MSTR's dilution over the last couple of years to show you guys that even though there has been some times where we've had some down periods in the price, like where sailors tapping the ATM and things like that. There are short sellers, guys, okay? There are a lot of people that don't believe the MNAV should trade over 1. So you got to understand it isn't necessarily these price declines, sailor tapping the ATM. September is generally a bad month for stocks in general. Okay, a lot of people take profits. A lot of people, rebalance their portfolios after Labor Day. There's an S&P 500 rebalancing a period usually in September. So a lot of factors are playing into here, but I really think it's important to take a look at the number of shares outstanding over time and see that the dilution isn't as great as you guys think it is. Okay, I'm over at macro trends. So take a look at the quarterly trend of shares outstanding. Okay, when MSTR started its Bitcoin strategy, right, that was back during Q3 2020, right? So the company had about 96 million shares outstanding, okay? Now they have 300 million shares outstanding, okay? So the number of shares outstanding, okay, over the last 5 years has increased threefold, okay? Yet MSTR's stock price, okay, is up 25x. So a 3 times X in shares outstanding due to ATM dilution and a 25x in stock price gains over the same period. So who won, guys? We're winning. Don't worry. Like I said, a lot of people don't really understand how the ATM works. It's not like traditional finance. This is digital capital. Digital capital is different. So anytime you're selling, a paper asset that can easily be generated and manipulated and things like that, i.e. stocks, and then you're using that capital to buy a hard asset, which is Bitcoin with a fixed supply, well, that's the smartest thing you can do now. Now, risk factors. I don't know how long this game will work. It's working now because Saylor, and there's only a handful of companies doing this on Wall Street, but if everyone tried to do this, well, it wouldn't work anymore now, would it? But the good thing is that Saylor was early to the game. He figured this out before anyone else did. Even if this strategy doesn't pull off as good as returns in the future, it doesn't matter. The company has such a competitive advantage with over 636,000 Bitcoin, okay? I mean, they just have such a head start. They can even in the future, they might be able to, slow down the ATM. They have over 10 times as much Bitcoin as any other company. So I think they're just getting aggressive with Bitcoin accumulation through the ATM because they're just trying to get it while it's cheap. As Saylor mentioned earlier, Bitcoin is on sale right here. So I think he really wants to get in before the Trump Treasury Reserve, before more companies added. I just really think he just wants to get as much Bitcoin as possible, as quickly as possible, before the price starts hitting 150K, 200K, things like that. And that's why the ATM program has been working like gangbusters, guys. Now, the last risk factor that I want to talk about when it comes to the ATM program, and this is something that a lot of people aren't really talking about on YouTube, is the interest payments, okay? The interest payments are a little bit interesting because Saylor, once again, has figured out another way to basically use Bitcoin strength to bring in new capital. And he's doing that with these preferred products that I've been talking a lot about on his channel. But the funny thing is that he's funding the interest payments by selling MSTR stock. It's pretty funny. Okay, so like I said, the ATM is going to be covering all of the interest and dividend payments, right? So the company MSTR has about $614 million in annual dividend interest payments that they do expect to pay by basically, diluting the common stock, diluting the common stock. This could be tricky, okay, if a lot of capital floods into some of these preferred shares over time, because obviously, as more and more investors put their money into some of these products, MSTR is going to have the interest payments are going to increase. So that is something I'm trying to figure out how Saylor and his team over there are going to kind of counter that, because a lot of these preferred equities that they're offering, okay, they're really out there to disrupt money market funds and kind of steal capital away from money market accounts, high yield savings and bonds and stuff like that. So That would be the one risk. If a lot of money piles into these interest payments are going to explode. So there could be extra dilution. But once again, that should be covered by increasing returns with Bitcoin. But that's probably the biggest risk factor in working out those interest payments. So that's it, guys. I hope I kind of broke down why I think the ATM is a good idea. Like I said, we could talk about this a little bit longer. We'll probably do a more in-depth video and see how Saylor handles the ATM as the MNAV starts increasing during the Q4 2025 bull run. Be sure to follow my channel. You get more information from me here, MSTR, and check out some of my previous videos as well, and subscribe to the channel to get more stuff from me. And that's all. See you guys in the next one.